Good day, everyone. Welcome to Black Logic. Trump's tariff deadline looms. August 1st deadline pressures nations as Trump readies new tariff risking higher U.S. prices. Also, tariffs fill U.S. coffers. Billions raised from tariffs, but U.S. consumers bear the brunt of all of these costs. Trump targets Canada with tariffs after Ottawa backs Palestinian state recognition. Republican lawmakers plan to defy Trump by pushing Epstein investigation records public. Lawyers warn Prime Minister Starmer of the UK Palestinian recognition move may violate international law. Trump rebukes UK leader for Palestinian stance, vows unwavering support for Israel. Tariffs and trade wars threaten higher prices on essentials from food to electronics. We're going to give you a powerful breakdown of how land equals power and how Western powers have garnered all that land. So tomorrow, Trump's big tariff hammer drops, and countries have had months to strike deals to avoid these very sky-high tariffs. But as of now, major players like India as well as Brazil are still holding out. China barely made the cut with a last-minute concession, while European remains split. So analysts are warning that these tariffs could jack up U.S. consumer prices over everyday goods from electronics to even our groceries. But the White House claims it's about fair trade and bringing manufacturing back home. But the question is still, will Americans stomach the cost for a stronger negotiating hand? Now, for those who are in financial turmoil and versus those who have financial stability, what is your take on it? Because for those of us who may not be as financially stable as others who probably make 6 to 7 and even 8 figures, for people who only probably make 4 to 5 figures a year, who this really going to hurt? Is the majority of the country part of the middle of the class, or the majority of the country is part of the poverty class? So I think depending on what status and what economic area and categorization that you are in, based upon your after tax income, will decide, will this mostly affect you or people related to you or even some of your friends and families? So I think when it comes to this, how are we going to, one, because the Feds just the other day stated that they're not going to change the interest rate. I think we're still around 4.25 or 4.5%. Now, even though that is down from 6%, and even at one point in time, it was even at 9%. So we have seen a sharp decline when it comes to the Fed rates, but still we're pretty high and we're still considered in an area of inflated prices. Okay. So again, I wonder how this is going to affect the economy. I wonder how this is going to affect your bottom line, which is the dollars that you make and the dollars that you spend. So when I look at this, we have to look at this holistically of how this is going to affect the country as a whole. So now you might be wondering, how much money is Uncle Sam actually pocketing from these tariffs? I think that is kind of the major question that a lot of people are asking. How much is America going to benefit from a lot of these tariffs? Now, according to the BBC, and I know you see Reuters on your screen here, but according to the BBC, tariffs have already ranked in tens of billions of dollars for the U.S. Treasury. Now, here's the kicker. Most of that cost is paid by foreign governments, but by U.S. businesses and consumers who are facing higher import prices. For a very long time, U.S. citizens, people who live in the U.S., we have been the largest consumer of almost every product in the world. Any product that's sold on the world stage, U.S. consumer has been their number one cash cow. Somehow, these financial experts know that the American behavior when it comes to spending will not change overnight. So even things, gas, food, electronic products, auto, anything dealing with those things, Americans will continue to spend their money regardless of the interest rate, regardless of the price hike. It seems as though that our behavior when it comes to finance, that we would rather be in debt than have financial stability. That is what the markets is stating. That in some regards is a little conjecture on my part, but when we really look at how the feds are keeping the rates the same way and how we have actual input of how tariffs will directly affect, in some regards, the American prices, so we can garner more funds from other countries who've been doing in wrong dealings with America for quite some time, may raise the prices of the essentials that we have in America. We may start to change our stance on being a consumer-based society. And that would be good for us, because then a lot of us wouldn't have to rely on Social Security. We will actually put more into our 401ks. We will actually save more a month. We will actually start thinking about the long-term effects of not having funds in our golden years. So these are the things that we really, I think, need to start paying attention to. Now, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, that things just got personal with Canada after Canadian leader voiced support for recognizing Palestine, and President Trump slapped them with new trade penalties, calling it betrayal of Western allies. Interesting. This isn't just about tariffs anymore, is it not? It's about geopolitical power play. And Canada's prime minister say they won't be bullied, but insiders warn that this could spiral into full-blown U.S.-Canada trade war that impacts everything from auto parts to dairy products, simply because they're trying to recognize that another country actually exists. And we're going to break that down in this land power stance. I'm gonna try to give it to you straight, no Tracy, ladies and gentlemen. So please stay tuned in right here on Black Logic, because I think this is going to be very informative and, of course, powerful. Now, meanwhile, an unexpected rebellion is born inside Trump's own GOP party, and lawmakers are reportedly plotting to release sensitive Epstein investigation files. They're soon to release these files because they continue to try to subpoena it. They continue to try to garner these files. And Trump is directly against this. Why? Because some Republicans believe withholding these files undermines transparency and could hurt the party in 2026 elections. And Trump, however, fears political sabotage. This is shaping up to be one of the biggest internal GOP power struggles we've seen in years. They believe that this may be damaging. And let me show you here, folks, because again, this is Thomas Massie, who is a Republican out of the state of Kentucky. And let me show you another headline here, what I think provides context. House GOP blocks second Democratic attempt to release Epstein files. Why are they continue to block these files? Now, some would say this is political theater, that this is not going to change anything. And even someone in my comment section stated that what the release of the Epstein files are going to do. And I simply replied, and I'm paraphrasing, that one is going to bring those, if any wrongdoings, if there is any, to justice. And that will incite convictions. And for the victims, potentially, if there are any victims, that they will receive justice, because their lives, if all of these allegations around children and sex, child pornography and exploitation thereof and sex trafficking, their lives will be forever changed. No one knows the extenuating circumstances behind the mental disabled that may occur because of these things happening to children. So again, for those who may question, what is this going to prove? What is this going to do? This is not per se that the American people, which I've stated, we want these answers. We want these names released. We want these files released. And I've stated that the American people want this, but what is it going to do? It's going to provide justice for the victims that said in these Epstein files, because Ghislaine Maxwell, she supposedly sex trafficked these children with Jeffrey Epstein. She's in jail for 20 some odd years. She's trying to be released from jail, stating that they don't have enough evidence to keep her in jail. Supposedly, Jeffrey Epstein hung himself in jail. Okay, he committed suicide in jail. Again, it just seems as though there's something more here that the American people and the victims, who are the most important component of these files being released. Because where are the victims? Where are the victims being silenced? Are there victims? Again, I think this will unveil and answer a lot of the questions that the American people have. The question is, why does it continue to be hidden? That's the question that I have, ladies and gentlemen. So if it's not a big deal, then to release the files. Oh, it's a distraction. This may hurt the GOP. In what way? In what way will this hurt the GOP? Now, UK warned that Prime Minister Starmer, his recognition could be illegal. They're stating that him just acknowledging that Palestinian is a state, that this could be against international law. Now, across the pond, legal experts are warning that UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, that his plan to recognize Palestine might violate international agreements in UK law. This move could trigger lawsuits and diplomatic chaos, especially with the US already pressuring London to side with Israel. And Prime Minister Starmer is standing firm, but insiders say that the legal challenges could derail his foreign policy ambitions before they even begin. Wow. So as you see here on your screen, folks, it states that what does recognizing a Palestinian state mean? That Palestine is a state that does and does not exist. Look at the oxymoronic of this. It has a large degree of international recognition, diplomatic missions abroad in terms that compete in sporting competitions, including the Olympics. But due to the Palestinians' long-running dispute with Israel, it has no international agreed boundaries, no capital, and no army. Due to Israel's military occupation in the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority set up in the wake of peace agreements in the 1990s. It is not in full control of its land or people. Gaza, where Israel is also the occupying power, is the midst of a devastating war. It goes on to state that given its status as a kind of quasi-state recognition is inevitably somewhat symbolic. It will represent a strong moral and political statement, but change little on the ground. But the symbolism is strong, as Foreign Secretary David Lammy pointed out during his speech at the UN on Tuesday. Britain bears a special burden of responsibility to support the two-state solution. Wow. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into that as well. But it's just a lot going on here this morning, ladies and gentlemen. And if you're not subscribed to Black Logic, please hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell so you are notified every time I release a video and or go live. Never one hold back, because President Trump publicly blasted Prime Minister Starmer, accusing him of undermining peace efforts in the Middle East. And Trump, he reiterated his unwavering support for Israel, warning that any move to recognize Palestine would be a gift to terrorists. This sharp rebuke could strain our US-UK relations and signal that Trump is positioning himself as the strongest pro-Israel voice on the global stage. Wow. There's a lot going on, folks, and I'm just trying to figure out what does all mean for us. We have higher tariffs. That means higher prices in some regard to check out. From clothes to cars, trade wars with allies could hit American exports and jobs. And international tensions over Palestine risk dragging into U.S. into new diplomatic and economic battles. That promotion you wanted, that raise you wanted, could that affect it because of these tariffs? All of these things are linked economically. But Trump allies argue that these moves are necessary to secure America's future, that it will break old trade dependencies and stand firmly with Israel. So I need you to stop whatever you're doing and listen closely. Because what I'm about to share with you, how you see every headline, every war, every conflict, you think that you understand. We're going to jump right in here and hit it hard and hit it quick. Because when the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says he wants to recognize Palestine as a state, it sounds righteous, does it not? Because we know we have Palestinian people. It sounds like justice in my ears if you're in Palestine and we don't know if we're going to recognize this as a state or not, but we have Palestinian people who state they are Palestinian, but we don't recognize you as a country. We don't recognize you as a region. We don't recognize you as a state. But here's the raw truth of it all. Doing so without negotiating a final binding peace agreement could break international law under the Oslo Accords. Recognition of statehood without mutual consent is seen as violating agreement meant to end the Israel-Palestinian war peacefully. But let's go a little bit deeper here. Because this isn't just about politics, this is about land. And land has always meant power. Whoever controls the land controls the resources, controls the border, and ultimately people's lives. And what you see today, Russia invading Ukraine, civil wars tearing apart Africa, chaos in Haiti, bombs falling in Gaza, all of it ties back to the same position tree. Do you guys know where this ties back to? European colonialism and Western imperial carving out the world in the way that they see it. Because if we start in Palestine for centuries, okay, we start off in Palestine for centuries. This region was home to Palestinian Arabs, Muslims, Christians, and Jews living side by side. That changed with British colonialism. After World War I, Britain seized control of Palestine from the Ottoman Empire under a League of Nations mandate. In 1917, Britain issued the Balfour Declaration promising a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine without consulting the native Palestinian. We're going to carve out land for you in that region over there, which is Palestine, but it'll be Israel now. And after World War II and the Holocaust, global sympathy for Jews fleeing persecution exploded. But instead of resettling refugees in Europe or America, colonial powers backed a Zionist project to create Israel and Palestine. So in 1948, Israel declared independence, but to do so, over 700,000 Palestinians were forcibly displaced in what now known as Nakba or catastrophe. The land was seized through British planning and Western military support. And the result of this, permanent divisions, walls, checkpoints, and decades of war. This is some of the things that people don't really want to state publicly on social media. But again, history provides context of the current conflicts and wars that we have today. A lot of people don't want to talk about history because then the people will be informed and the people will be educated. And you may have more people siding with one state or one region or one group of people more so than the people that another country or Western power prompts up to be holier than thou. What am I saying? What's happening in Palestine is not isolated. It's a template repeated worldwide. Let's connect the dots. Should we not? Should we connect the dots? Because when we look at the history, Ukraine was part of the Russian Empire. Later, the Soviet Union. Borders were drawn by imperial powers, not by the people themselves. The people were always the pawns. If you notice, on a chessboard, the pawns are positioned in two rows. So you have two layers of pawns, two rows of pawns before you get to the king, the queen, the rook, and the knight, and the bishop. When Ukraine learned when Ukraine kind of learned that the West, and we're referring to NATO, Russia invaded in 2014 and escalated in 2022 and reclaimed land historically that has been controlled for a very long time, because again, land equals power. And Russia's fight is about controlling old Soviet lands and resources, not just ideology. And as I told you before, Ukraine was part of the Russian Empire. So is this way that Putin is trying to take back what is potentially rightfully his, according to historical context? When we look at the Sudanese civil war and Darfur spillovers, history states that Sudan was under British Egyptian colonial rule and split along artificial north-south lines after the independence. Ethnic and religious divisions fueled by British policies led to repeated civil wars. We understand the colonial Western power lines, how they divided Africa. We know this because the latest war that started roughly in 2023 up until now pits rival generals for control of these areas and resource-rich Darfur. Because again, land equals power, and colonial borders force rival tribes and ethnic groups into one state, sparking endless wars for control of fertile and oil-rich lands. When we speak about the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Rwanda conflict, because Belgium brutally exploited Congo for rubber and minerals after independence, Western-backed assassination like Patrice Lumumba. Fractured leadership. See, that's what you do. You cut the head off the snake and then the body wiggles. Rwanda's genocide spilled into the Congo, sparking decade-long wars over land and mineral wealth. Land equals power. Multinational companies and neighboring nations still fight over Congo's cobalt and coltan resources Europeans once stole for free. So when we look at all of these conflicts, all of these wars, they're not tribal the way that mass media and legacy media points to us. This is about things that happened sometimes 100 years ago, sometimes 40 to 50, 60 years ago, of Western powers drawing colonial lines through rich resource African countries, and not just Africa. I'm pointing out some other things as well, because this happens in the Middle East. When it comes to the state of Israel and the state of Palestine, oh, did I recognize Palestine as a state? I say that for a friend. When it comes to the Ethiopian civil conflict of Tigray and Amhara, Italy's failed colonial invasion left Ethiopia scarred, while European drawn borders separated ethnic groups. Because today, federalist tensions and central government crackdowns have reignited conflict because land equals power. Ethnic regions fight to reclaim autonomy. Ancestral land stripped by central authority, a structure imposed during colonial partitioning. They're just partitioning the land however they see it. Miramar civil wars and insurgencies. Because the British colonial rule in Burma forced dozens of ethnic groups into one nation. They forced all of these groups into one nation, ladies and gentlemen, empowering a Balmar elite group, post-independence, and minorities within this Miramar Burma region. And a lot of these have faced violent suppression. Again, military wants to use land grabs and scorched earth campaigns to crush minority autonomy. Because this is, again, about power. And if you flip it, you inverse it, power equals land. What about Haiti? Haiti's violence and gang conflict, those Haitians just can't get it right. Those Haitians just can't come together. But historically, Haiti was the first Black republic, was it not? Defeating French colonialism in 1804, but Haiti has been forever scarred. When you look at these countries that are still in shambles, understand the context in which how these countries are today. The first Black republic in 1804, when Haiti has gained its independence by fighting and killing off the French colonial powers, the French colonial invaders. For that, France, the US, and other Western powers isolated and economically strangled Haiti, forcing it to pay reparations to former slave owners the same way that America did to the former slave owners here in America, but has not gave reparations to the descendants of chattel slaves that are foundational Black Americans here, because a lot of people are against it, even though they knew the context of history that this country actually gave reparation to slave owners, even though those slaves were producing millions and billions of dollars and made America the most powerful country in America that we are today. Why do people believe that the money back then doesn't matriculate, transfer, and multiply to make people rich today? I don't understand. Money doesn't disappear. It just transforms into another asset. Are we understanding economics here? Because decades of foreign intervention destroyed political stability, did it not? Land equals power. Foreign-backed coups and IMF policy have kept Haitian land poor and dependent, now overran by gangs as power vacuums grows. This is how you destabilize a country, ladies and gentlemen. Just a couple of years ago, they killed the president of Haiti. We have links and ties to militia groups that kind of traces back to America, no less. When we look at this, the division of the world and how power is divided and how resources are divvied up, it seems as though that these European and Western powers have done a thing on the world. And we should pay attention to this, because this is going to answer a lot of the questions that you have. When we look at, say, how in the coastal Western African crisis, France and Britain carved arbitrary border across West Africa, groups like the Tariffs were split across nations, because today jihadist insurgents, climate change, and French military interventions destabilized the region. Decertification and foreign mining contracts fuel wars for territory and survival. All of these countries, all of these, especially we're speaking in the West African, we're talking about Senegal, we're talking about Burkina Faso, that speak French. They were colonialized, okay, right there in their own country. They were colonialized. They was in a state of colonialism. They were controlled, and they had to fight, plead, and politicize to get France out of their country. Most of these African countries just gained independence in the 60s. That's not long ago. A lot of your parents, a lot of people watching right now were born during that time. These African countries just got their independence. So this is not ancient old history. This is today. When I look at regions, Iraq, Iran, and their aligned militias, and Israel, Iran tensions. When we look at all of these different countries, whether they be in Africa or the Middle East, again, Britain and France secretly divided the Middle East through the Sykes-Picot Agreement in 1916, ignoring ethnic realities. And the U.S. invasion of Iraq, which I was a part of, toppled Saddam, but left power vacuums exploiting by militias aligned with Iran. Now, don't tie the two of this history in the context of our retaliation in regards of 9/11. I'm not stating that. I'm talking about the power vacuums of us going over of our retaliation because of 9/11 and how this furthered the struggle within the Middle Eastern region. Land equals power. The struggle over oil fields and control of holy lands continue to this day, including Iran and Israel shadow wars. We should know we was a part of that because we bombed all of their nuclear alleged sites that they were trying to produce uranium on a nuclear scale. So I'm saying all of this because I want you guys to connect the dots. I want you guys to connect the dots from Africa to Asia to the Middle East, because European powers carved up continents like it's cake. They just, If you look at Africa, all those different countries, it was never divided like that. They were always conjoined. How about this? What about South Africa? How silly is South Africa? Not as the people. We're not talking about the people. I'm talking about the colonial line. Instead of giving South Africa a name, they just call it South of Africa. What if, as we look at the United States as it pertains to colonial lines, what if the southern part of America was just South America or South US and there was no name given to it? I really want you guys to really think about how they drew and garnered and broke apart the world through colonial eyes, because they understood by dividing people and incentivizing one group over another, because they didn't have the population to sustain. They had the military prowess, the military technology to control and occupy a lot of these countries, a lot of these continents for a short period of time. So what they did was divide people by their tribes and gave one tribe advanced technology during that time, whether it be gunpowder and guns and long, sharp knives, or just, again, advanced technology during that time. So they can be the ruling faction as long as they keep in business for the resources that those colonial powers wanted. And when those people started to realize we're fighting against our own people, then Western power started to assassinate key people in leadership, key people within their government, key people in politics. So you can now disable the regent. What used to be shared ancestral lands became countries separated by colonial lines. Families were split into nationalities that they never chose. Tribes were forced to fight for borders that Europeans drew to divide resources for themselves. And granted, to my point, this even happened in Europe. When you're talking about the different Viking states, the Danes, the Netherlands, the Swiss, Finland, all of these people who went out loot and plunder against their own selves, against Great Britain and France, so on and so forth. It happened there as well. And Israel, creation, and Palestine is just one chapter in the global book of land theft and displacement and empirical control. Even Russia's invasion of Ukraine reflects older imperial rivalries in Europe itself. Land equals power. Land is survival. It's food, it's water, it's minerals, it's oil, and sacred ancestral, some spiritual connection that people may have. But we're talking about resources, because the more land you have deems and equates to the more resources you have and the more resources you could obtain. Losing land means losing freedom. Losing land means losing power. Losing land means losing resources. And as long as those colonial lines stay drawn and enforced by Western powers, America, the country I love, the country my ancestors built foundationally, wars will never end. And recognizing Palestine without undoing this colonial framework may only harden those lines, just as it has across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. What about the United States of Africa? How strong that would be. Shout out to Julius Malema. We have to stop pretending that these wars are ancient tribal feuds over religious hatred. This goes far deeper than religions, folk. This is far deeper. This is about power. This is about land. These are colonial wounds still bleeding because no one has healed the theft of land or restored the true self-determination. So don't tell the people that we don't understand the state of Israel and the state of Palestine and all the conflicts and all the wars and all the colonial lines that was driven because the colonial powers wanted to divide power so they can stay rich. Because when you go to Europe, oh, it's so pristine. They have all of these monumental figures and, oh, it's great here. It's peaceful here. And then when you look at the rest of the world, outside of Australia, outside of Europe, and America is a special exception because we got a little bit of peace, a little bit of war. Look at the rest of the world in turmoil, in chaos. The world at war. And at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, as I told you before, some people are looking at this as tribal. I'm just looking at the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is about power. And when it comes to power, it's about land.